Opposing Gloves here, and today we're going to talk about adding harmonics to our modulators, high harmonics, to our feedback modulators. Okay, so we have our modulator. That's really great. It's a saw wave being self-oscillated, and we get a saw wave. Not news to us anymore. So if I were like put out 3 and modulate 3 by 3, I'll get 2 saw waves. If I turn this off, as you can see, it just increases in amplitude. Now you might be wondering, why didn't it go up like dramatically when there were 2 going out? Well, so when signals sum, the way we hear isn't linear. There's not like, oh, it doubled. It's I believe it's plus 3 dB when signals add up like that. I might be thinking of power right now. Anyways, backing it up, because that stuff might be like foreign language to some of you guys. So okay, now so this makes sense. So we have this thing going on. Now what happens when we add a harmonic? So what happens when we do something like that? We get noise. Now if we change our modulation index so that it doesn't allow so many sidebands, because we talked about modulation index increases the amount of sidebands we can have or not have. You can see high frequency contents just being aliased back in, and we have again quantization error going on. So you can see the farther up this harmonic is, the farther away. Here's our fundamental. It doesn't take as much energy away from our fundamental, but all this content's hanging out up here. So for that reason, you might go for the very high stuff because it might alias a particular way you like. Up there, though, it's essentially just noise. So if we bring it down here, though, so that's pretty powerful options right there when we add harmonics. Okay, so let's do that with the triangle wave. Now I've been playing high notes. Let's play some low notes. Now playing low notes here does matter. Why? Because our ratio is based off of the note we're hitting. So if we hit really low notes, we have a lot more spectral room to move around. Let's go to the sine wave again. So you can see we begin to do some really interesting things. Now we can do some other cool things. We go to the saw wave. We can convert it to sine harmonics. And here's all our waves. And then we can mess with the phase of these as a starting point for something. And I'm going to leave my modulation index not super high. You see certain frequencies begin to get emphasized versus others. We get a lot more noise when I do that. So that's just the basic idea of today, is that by manipulating high harmonic relationships, we can create some very interesting textures. This will become a common tool you are used to using later. So, yeah, because you'll be like, oh, I need a crazy oscillator with some straight jagged lines in the middle, and you'll do something like that, and that'll give you like, oh, look at that. I can create an oscillator with some lines that go up and down. So as it's moving, I'll get tiny pitch changes the whole way it's going down, and I'll have 2 big pitch changes. So we have a lot of little. So let's give you an example of that. That's sort of the usefulness of this. Something that people don't usually talk about. And so let's go over here. I'm going to make this a sine wave and modulate it by 2. And so increase this. Okay, that's cool. Now let's add a high harmonic to my triangle wave. Now I'll get a whole bunch of little changes according to a big one. This will actually, that vibrato-y effect is this. These are essentially vibratos. It's essentially, I haven't said this yet in this series, which is sort of silly, but it's telling the pitch to change. There's almost every series draws the analogy of a vibrato out of it, but yeah, so that's a really useful relationship. Now you notice that these lines all of a sudden do not become triangles anymore when they're a sine wave, which is something. So now we know it's going to behave differently. Like even the vibrato quality will change versus this. So we can look at a signal at some sort of a modulator and get a very defined relationship out of it. So we know that we're going down and changing, but look at this. All our high harmonics are also saw waves. So what's the deal with this? Well, now we know that our high harmonic information is sort of based off of our base wave. So we can make really cool sound decisions on our modulator side just simply by choosing a wave. And you can see the more oscillations of the waveform in one video because there's tiny ones inside the bigger one. It's like duplicating the big one. So that's a really useful piece of information, something that people often don't consciously make decisions about when they're adding high harmonics, is that basically little waveforms are introduced in the big one and they get added together and then the phase aligns and all this other junk. So that's something really important to note, especially with citrus. Now, in FM8, you don't have such an option. You have things like TX waveforms, or these are the offset waveforms. You have things like formants waveforms. If we come over here, do like 10th formant. If we go over here, 1 plus 7. So here's a high harmonic plus the 7th. Here's a high harmonic plus the 8th. High harmonic plus the 2nd. But this is one thing that FM8 falls horribly short on, is that ability. Over here, all this stuff we were just doing, like not options in FM8. FM8 has other cool things though that it can do. So when we get later on into moving FM and things like that, we'll talk about some of those things. If you have any questions, let me know. Subscribe and have a blessed day.
Opposing gloves. Reversing.